My fiancée decided she needed a break to travel through Europe with her college friends, so I called off the wedding entirely. Alright, here we go. Emma and I had been in a relationship for roughly 5 years, and we'd been engaged for nearly 3 of those. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, or at least that's what I believed. We had our wedding date locked in, all the vendors were booked, and I genuinely thought we were both moving in the same direction. Turns out I couldn't have been more wrong about that assumption. Around 6 weeks before everything fell apart, Emma tells me she's planning this European adventure with her old college crew. She described it as some once-in-a-lifetime experience or something along those lines. I didn't have any problem with it, honestly. I wasn't about to be the guy who stops his fiancée from enjoying a trip with her friends. I actually drove her straight to the airport, carried her luggage, kissed her goodbye, and told her to have an amazing time. That's when she dropped the bomb on me, the whole "we should take a break" conversation. It wasn't like she sat me down for a serious discussion beforehand. No, she just casually mentions it as we're approaching the security checkpoint like it's some trivial matter. I remember standing there thinking, what on earth does she mean by a break, but before I could even get a word out or ask for clarification, she's already in the security line giving me a little wave and disappearing into the crowd. I didn't fully register what had just happened at first. I walked back to my car and headed home, convincing myself it was probably just some strange nervous comment she made because of travel anxiety. But then I started trying to reach out to her, just wanting to check if she'd arrived safely and see how things were going. And what do you know, I was blocked. Completely blocked on every single platform. I couldn't call her, couldn't text, nothing worked. I even checked her social media accounts to see if maybe she'd posted updates about her travels or given any indication of what was happening. Blocked on all of those too. That's the moment when reality started setting in, that this whole break situation wasn't just some offhand remark she'd made in passing. She actually meant every word of it. She genuinely just left for Europe and chose to cut off all communication with me without having a single proper conversation about it. I tried giving it a few days, thinking maybe she'd cool down and realize how absurd she was being. But after 5 straight days of absolute radio silence, I'd had enough. I made my decision right there and then that the wedding wasn't happening anymore. And honestly, I felt relieved about that choice. Why would I want to be with someone who thinks they can just walk away from a relationship whenever the mood strikes them? I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to decide when she felt ready to be committed again. Absolutely not. She'd made her choice clear, so I made mine just as clear. I went ahead and canceled everything related to the wedding. The reception hall, the food service, the floral arrangements, everything we'd planned together. I pulled the plug on all of it. Then I took things a step further and decided she definitely wasn't moving into my place either, which was supposed to happen in March. Nope, she could figure out her own housing situation when she returned from her little vacation because it wasn't going to involve living with me anymore. Weeks passed by and I didn't hear a single thing from her. Not one message, not one phone call, absolutely nothing. Then completely out of nowhere one day, she calls me. I didn't even recognize it was her initially because she must have been using a different phone number or borrowed someone else's phone. She tells me she's returning on Thursday morning, gives me all her flight information like I'm supposed to care about any of it, and acts like everything between us is perfectly fine. Like she hadn't just ghosted me for 6 entire weeks. I paused for a second and then responded with, what does any of that have to do with me? And man, the silence that followed on her end was absolutely priceless. She had no idea how to respond to that. I didn't give her any opportunity to start explaining herself either. I blocked her number just like she'd done to me, and that was supposed to be the end of everything. Or at least that's what I thought at the time. Later that same day, I figured it was time to inform people about what was happening, especially since the wedding was obviously off and our relationship was over. We had this group chat with some of our mutual friends and family members, so I just posted a quick update saying, hey everyone, just wanted to let you all know the wedding has been cancelled and our relationship is done. I didn't expect it to blow up the way it did, but people definitely had questions. Everyone started asking what the hell had happened, so I laid out the entire situation for them. I explained how Emma went off to Europe, decided unilaterally that we needed a break without even consulting me about it, and then proceeded to block me for 6 solid weeks. They were all pretty shocked by the whole thing. Some people were genuinely angry on my behalf, which honestly felt really good. You never truly know how people will react when you drop news like that on them, but it was reassuring to have some solid support. Around 2 in the afternoon, Emma finally decided to jump into the conversation. She didn't say much at first, just asked if I could call her so we could talk about everything privately. I wasn't interested in that at all. I told her we could discuss it right there in the group chat if she actually wanted to explain her actions. She didn't appreciate that response though. She said something along the lines of "this is between the two of us, not meant for everyone else to see." Yeah, no chance. She made this whole situation public the moment she walked out of my life without any explanation. She tried messaging me a few more times throughout the day, but I kept my responses brief and to the point. I wasn't in the mood to listen to whatever excuses she'd cooked up. By 6 in the evening, she was literally begging me to pick her up from the airport so we could have a face-to-face conversation and work everything out. Like seriously, as if absolutely nothing had happened between us. I told her straight up that was your plan, not mine. None of this was ever my plan. And I meant every single word of it. I wasn't about to go running to the airport like some desperate fool after everything she'd put me through. To be completely honest, part of me was still hoping she'd provide some kind of explanation that would actually make sense of all this. I guess I wanted to believe there was some legitimate reason, something that would somehow justify why she'd treated me this way. But as the hours continued ticking by, I came to the realization that there wasn't going to be any satisfactory reason. She wasn't going to come back with some grand apology or tell me there'd been some massive misunderstanding. She'd made her choice perfectly clear, and I had to accept that reality and live with it. So over the next few days, I focused all my energy on getting my life back on track. I wasn't about to let this situation destroy me completely. I started going through all our shared accounts, making sure everything was properly divided and separated. And yeah, I changed the locks on my apartment door too. The last thing I needed was her showing up unannounced thinking she could just waltz right back into my life like nothing had happened. I was completely done with all of that nonsense. I even started researching some trips of my own. I figured if she could run off to Europe for 6 weeks, maybe I deserved to take some time for myself too. I definitely earned it after all the garbage she'd put me through. Anyway, that's pretty much where things stood at that point. She was scheduled to be back in a couple of days, but I wasn't going to be there waiting around for her. She could figure out her own transportation home. As far as I was concerned, this entire chapter of my life was officially closed, and I was ready to move forward toward better things. Alright, so let me tell you what happened in the aftermath because things escalated pretty quickly. After I'd made peace with the fact that the wedding was permanently off, I figured it was only a matter of time before Emma tried reaching out again. I was prepared for it, but what I didn't anticipate was how fast she'd try to play herself up as the victim in all this. It all started when I received this message from one of our mutual friends, Rachel. Now Rachel's a solid person, she's always been honest and straightforward with me, but this particular time she seemed a bit hesitant, like she really didn't want to get dragged into the middle of our drama. But she sends me a screenshot from another group chat, one that obviously I wasn't included in. It was Emma talking to some of her friends, trying to paint this whole disaster like I was the one who'd overreacted to everything. Can you even believe that? In the chat, she's telling everyone how stressed out she was about the upcoming wedding and how she desperately needed some space to clear her mind. She even wrote something like I didn't intend for the break to last that long, but I assumed he would understand where I was coming from. And then there was this absolute gem of a statement. I just needed to figure out if I was truly ready for marriage, but he went ahead and canceled everything before I even had a chance to talk to him about it. I almost burst out laughing when I read that message. Like, she blocked me on absolutely everything for 6 entire weeks, then acts like I'm the unreasonable one who didn't give her an opportunity to communicate. No, that's not how any of this works. I felt my blood pressure rising just reading through those messages. She was playing the whole poor me routine, telling everyone that I was being irrational and that I'd rushed into canceling the wedding without proper consideration. At this point, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let her keep running her mouth, making me look like the villain in this story. So I decided to address it head-on and set the record straight. I wasn't going to allow her to rewrite history and make herself look innocent. I jumped into the main group chat where all our close friends and family members were still buzzing about the wedding cancellation news. Everyone was trying to piece together what the hell was actually going on, and I figured it was the right time to clear the air completely. I posted a message that said, "Look, I just want everyone to know the actual truth here. Emma decided we were taking a break without having any discussion with me about it, blocked me on every platform for 6 solid weeks, and now she's acting like this whole thing is just some kind of miscommunication. I canceled the wedding because I refused to sit around waiting for someone who didn't respect me enough to even have a basic conversation. People immediately started responding, offering their support and saying how messed up the entire situation was from start to finish. Emma stayed completely silent in the chat for a good hour or so after that, but then she finally chimed in with some weak excuse about how she didn't think things would escalate this far and how she never intended to hurt anyone in the process. Once again, zero accountability, no genuine apology, just attempting to save face in front of everyone. One of my good buddies, Marcus, jumped into the conversation and called her out right there in front of the entire group. He wrote, "Emma, you can't just drop a break on someone and then disappear for weeks on end and expect everything to be perfectly fine when you decide to come back. That's not how relationships function." Honestly, I was relieved that someone else finally said it because I was getting exhausted from constantly having to defend my own position. Now here's where things got really interesting. Emma's friend Nicole, who I'd always suspected was kind of shady and two-faced, decided to jump in and back Emma up. Nicole starts going on about how Emma's been going through so much stress and how wedding pressure can really mess with someone's mental state. She was trying to make it sound like Emma was this victim of overwhelming anxiety, which okay, I understand that planning a wedding can be stressful. But come on, that's not a valid excuse to block your fiancé and go completely radio silent for 6 weeks while you're partying across Europe. Nicole continues saying stuff like you should have given Emma more time to process everything properly, and maybe you acted way too hastily by canceling the wedding so quickly. That's when I completely lost my patience. I wasn't about to sit there and listen to some third-party person who wasn't even directly involved in the relationship try to tell me how I should have handled my own situation. So I replied, "Nicole, with all due respect, you don't know even half of what actually happened here. This isn't about wedding-related stress. It's about the fact that Emma blocked me, cut off all communication completely, and didn't bother to contact me even once during her entire trip. I tried everything. I called, I texted, and I got absolutely nothing in return. How much more time was I supposed to give her exactly? Another 6 weeks? An entire year? If Emma didn't want to be in this relationship anymore, she could have just said that directly. But instead, she disappeared and expected me to just sit around waiting indefinitely. That's not how any of this works." The chat went completely quiet after I posted that response. I think everyone was finally starting to realize just how messed up the whole situation truly was. Even Nicole didn't have much to say after that exchange. A couple of days went by, and I thought maybe things would finally start to settle down and calm themselves. But nope, that's not what happened at all. I get yet another phone call, this time from Emma's sister Claire. Now Claire and I had always maintained a pretty good relationship, so I assumed maybe she was calling just to check in on me or see how I was holding up. But as soon as I picked up the phone, she immediately went into attack mode with "Why did you go ahead and cancel the wedding without talking to Emma first?" I was absolutely stunned. I genuinely didn't expect Claire to take Emma's side, especially after everything I'd already explained to everyone. I responded, "Claire, your sister blocked me on everything. How exactly was I supposed to talk to her when she literally cut off all communication channels?" Claire didn't really have a solid answer to that, but she kept pushing the issue, saying Emma was completely heartbroken and that I should have waited for her to return home so we could talk everything through properly. At that point, I'd had more than enough of these conversations. I told Claire straight up, "Look, I understand you want to defend your sister, that's natural. But what she did was fundamentally wrong. She didn't give me any say whatsoever in this whole break situation, and I'm not going to wait around indefinitely for someone who doesn't respect me as a person. If Emma wants to explain herself, she knows exactly how to reach me. But I'm not going to be the one to fix this mess she created." Claire tried to continue the conversation, but I just told her I had to go and hung up the phone. I wasn't about to keep rehashing the same conversation with every single person Emma decided to send my way as her messenger. That same night, I received another message from Emma. This time she was apologizing, well, sort of apologizing. She said she was sorry for how things had gone down, but she still didn't take any real responsibility for the choices she'd made throughout this entire ordeal. It was one of those classic half apologies where she tried to make it sound like we were both equally at fault for what had happened. I didn't bother replying to her message. There was absolutely no point in going back and forth with her anymore. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. I wasn't interested in hearing more excuses or letting her drag this situation out any longer than it had already gone on. After that interaction, I made absolutely sure to block her everywhere again, just to guarantee there wouldn't be any additional drama coming my way. I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses anymore or allowing her to keep manipulating the narrative. At the end of the day, I came to an important realization. I dodged a serious bullet with this whole situation. If this is how Emma handled herself when things got even slightly difficult, I couldn't even begin to imagine what being married to her would have been like down the road. I felt genuinely bad about all the time we'd wasted together, but I was incredibly glad it ended before things got any worse than they already were. Now I could finally move on with my life, and that's exactly what I fully intended to do. Alright, so after all the chaos and drama with Emma and her persistent attempts to guilt-trip me into reconsidering the wedding, which by the way didn't work at all, I thought things would finally quiet down for a bit. But nope, not in my life apparently. Turns out I had way more coming at me than I could have possibly expected. About a week after I'd blocked Emma for what I thought was the final time, I received this random phone call from a number I didn't recognize at all. I almost didn't answer it because at this stage I really wasn't in the mood for any more drama and confrontation. But for some inexplicable reason, I decided to pick up, and guess who it turned out to be? Emma's mother. Yeah, her actual mother Diana. Like what the hell was happening at this point? Now Emma's mom Diana had always been one of those people who acted super sweet and kind to your face, but you could always tell she had this whole passive-aggressive vibe just bubbling underneath the surface. She was the type of person who would give you what seemed like a compliment, but somehow it still felt like an insult when you really thought about it. You know exactly what I mean, right? Anyway, Diana starts off the conversation all friendly and cheerful like absolutely nothing had happened between us. "Hi sweetheart, how have you been doing?" She says, like we hadn't just cancelled an entire wedding and like I hadn't blocked her daughter from every aspect of my life. I wasn't about to play along with these games, so I kept my response short and direct. "I'm doing fine, Diana. What's going on?" That's when she launched into the whole guilt trip routine. She goes, "Oh, we were also looking forward to the wedding ceremony, and this whole situation has really devastated Emma, you know. She's been crying every single day since she got back home. She's just been an absolute mess over all of this. Now I wasn't about to let her make me feel guilty about Emma's situation, not after everything she'd put me through. So I told her straight up, Diana, I'm sorry Emma's upset about how things turned out, but she made her own choices here. I didn't call off the wedding for no reason whatsoever." And then Diana hits me with this statement, "Well, maybe you overreacted just a little bit. You know, Emma was simply nervous about the whole wedding situation, and sometimes people make mistakes when they're under a lot of stress. Don't you think you should consider giving her a second chance at this?" I genuinely couldn't believe what I was hearing from her. I mean, she was acting like Emma blocking me for 6 entire weeks and completely disappearing was just some minor mistake that could be easily overlooked. I wasn't having any of it. "Diana," I said, "this wasn't just about nerves or pre-wedding jitters. She literally blocked me on every single platform and went off to Europe without saying a single word to me about any of this. That's not something you just casually brush off and forget about. If Emma was genuinely having doubts about our relationship, she should have talked to me directly about it, not completely shut me out of her life like I didn't even exist." But Diana wasn't finished yet, oh no. She kept pushing and pushing. "I know it seems really bad from your perspective, but think about all the years you two have been together. You've had such a wonderful relationship over the years. Don't you want to at least try and save it? I'm absolutely sure once Emma properly explains everything, you'll understand her perspective better." At this point, I was getting pretty annoyed and frustrated. It was like Diana wasn't even actually listening to anything I was saying. She was so completely focused on getting me to take Emma back that she wasn't even considering how I felt about the entire situation. I took a deep breath, trying my absolute best to stay calm and collected, and said, "Diana, with all due respect, Emma had 6 full weeks to reach out to me at any point, and she chose not to. I've already made up my mind about this. The wedding is permanently off, and that decision is final." I genuinely thought that would be the end of our conversation, but Diana apparently wasn't done yet. She continues with, "Well, if you absolutely won't talk to Emma directly, at least come over to our house for dinner so we can all talk about this together as a family. Maybe we can work through this situation together and find a solution." I was completely speechless at that suggestion. She was actually inviting me to their family dinner like this was some kind of minor disagreement or argument that could be easily solved over a plate of spaghetti and meatballs. I knew immediately that this conversation wasn't going anywhere productive, so I told her thanks for the offer, but I genuinely think it's best if we all just move on with our lives at this point. And with that, I ended the call. You'd think that would finally be the end of it, right? Wrong again. The very next day, I receive a message from Emma's father. Now let me tell you, her dad Robert is one of those old-school traditional guys who thinks he's always right about absolutely everything. He's never really liked me all that much, but he tolerated my presence because Emma and I were in a relationship together. So when I saw the message notification from him, I immediately knew it wasn't going to be any kind of friendly chat or well wishes. He basically went off on me, saying how I was throwing away something really good and that I was completely ruining Emma's entire life by not giving her a fair chance to explain her side of the story. He even wrote something along the lines of "Real men don't act like this. You should be standing by your fiancé's side, not running away at the very first sign of trouble or difficulty." That statement really pissed me off significantly. I mean, I'd been standing by Emma's side for years and years, and this is the treatment I got in return. I didn't bother replying to Robert's message at all because I knew it would just turn into a completely pointless argument that wouldn't resolve anything. And honestly, I was completely over the entire situation. But that wasn't even close to the worst part of all this. A couple of days later, I receive yet another message from Emma herself. She'd used some other random number to reach out to me, and it was this incredibly long message, like multiple paragraphs worth of text. She went on and on about how sorry she was for everything that had happened, how she didn't mean to cause me any pain, and how she'd realized she'd made a terrible mistake. She claimed she was confused and uncertain about the wedding and needed time to think things through properly, but didn't know how to tell me directly, so she panicked and just blocked me instead. Then she dropped the absolute bombshell statement on me. She said she still wanted to go through with getting married. Yeah, you read that correctly. After everything that had transpired, after blocking me, ghosting me for 6 solid weeks, and trying to blame it all on wedding-related nerves and stress, she still somehow wanted to marry me. It was like she was living in some complete fantasy world where everything could just magically go back to normal with a simple heartfelt apology and everything would be perfectly fine again. I sat there staring at that message for quite a while, not really knowing how to respond or what to say. Part of me was still genuinely angry, actually most of me was still furious, but there was this tiny part of me that felt, I don't know, sad I guess. Like, we'd spent so many years together building this relationship, and this is how it all ultimately ended. It wasn't how I'd ever pictured things going between us, that's for sure. But the more I sat there thinking about the entire situation, the more I came to realize that this wasn't something I could possibly forgive or move past. It wasn't just about the wedding ceremony or her trip to Europe anymore. It was fundamentally about trust. Emma had completely shattered that trust between us, and no amount of heartfelt apologies or lengthy explanations was going to magically fix what she'd broken. So I did what I honestly should have done right from the very start. I blocked the number she'd used to text me, deleted the entire message without responding, and moved on for real this time. After all of that exhausting back and forth, I genuinely felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders completely. I wasn't tied down anymore by Emma's constant guilt trips or her family's relentless pressure and manipulation. I could finally focus entirely on myself and what I actually wanted for my future moving forward. And honestly, it felt pretty damn amazing. Alright, so you'd naturally think after I blocked Emma and her entire family yet again, things would finally settle down and calm themselves, right? Wrong, of course not, because that would be way too easy and straightforward. I swear it's like they just couldn't let go of the fact that the wedding was permanently cancelled, and they kept coming at me from every possible angle, like they were trying to wear down my resolve or something similar. Spoiler alert, it absolutely didn't work. A couple of days after Emma's latest desperate attempt to reach out to me, I receive a text message from someone else entirely. This time it was from one of Emma's bridesmaids, Jessica. Now Jessica and I weren't exactly what you'd call close friends or anything. I mean, she was always pleasant enough when we all hung out together as a group, but she was definitely more Emma's friend than mine. So when I saw her name appear on my phone screen, I was immediately suspicious about her intentions. The text message started off innocent enough. She was asking how I was doing, saying she'd heard about the breakup and everything, blah blah blah. But I wasn't stupid or naive. I knew she wasn't just randomly checking in on me for no particular reason. So I kept my response brief and straightforward, something along the lines of yeah, I'm doing fine, just dealing with everything one day at a time, trying to move forward. And then she hits me with it, I honestly think you should hear Emma out and give her a chance to explain. Here we go again with this nonsense. I stared at my phone screen for a good minute, trying to figure out if I should even bother responding to this or just block Jessica immediately and move on. Part of me wanted to just block her right there and be done with it, but I was genuinely curious about where this conversation was headed. So I asked her directly why she thought I should do that. Jessica proceeds to go on this long elaborate rant about how Emma's been really struggling emotionally and how she's been crying literally every single day since she returned from Europe. She said Emma was apparently too scared and anxious to reach out to me directly because she thought I wouldn't listen to anything she had to say. Apparently, Emma had been telling all her friends that she'd messed up catastrophically but didn't have any idea how to fix the situation she'd created. I sighed deeply, feeling that familiar irritation bubble up inside me all over again. Jessica, I've heard all of this exact same story already, multiple times in fact. I gave Emma plenty of chances to explain herself properly, and she chose not to take them. She blocked me for 6 entire weeks and then somehow expected everything to be perfectly fine when she decided to come back. That's not something I can just casually forget about or overlook. Jessica tried pushing again, going on about how Emma just needed some space to clear her head and didn't actually mean to hurt me in the process. But the more she kept talking, the more I realized exactly what was really happening here. Emma had obviously sent Jessica to do her dirty work for her, thinking maybe I'd be more receptive to listening to someone else rather than her directly. It was like she didn't even have the courage or guts to face me herself anymore, which just proved my point even further. I was completely done with this charade. I told Jessica, look, I genuinely appreciate you trying to help and mediate here, but this isn't something that can be magically fixed with a few heartfelt apologies and explanations. It's over between us, and that's absolutely final. I could tell she wanted to keep pushing the issue and continue the conversation, but I didn't give her that opportunity. I blocked her number right after sending that message. And then, just when I genuinely thought I was finally in the clear and could have some peace, I receive another message. This time it was from one of Emma's cousins, Derek. Now I hadn't heard from Derek in literally months, and completely out of nowhere he's texting me asking if we can meet up in person to talk about everything that's been going on. At this point in time, I was so incredibly fed up with everyone trying to drag me back into Emma's never-ending drama that I almost didn't respond at all. But curiosity got the better of me once again. I wanted to know what angle Derek was going to come at me with and what his pitch would be. So I reluctantly agreed to meet him for coffee. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Derek was already sitting there waiting for me, looking noticeably nervous and uncomfortable. We sat down across from each other, and after some incredibly awkward small talk about nothing in particular, he finally got straight to the actual point. Look man, I know this whole situation with Emma has been a complete mess and disaster. I just wanted to check in with you personally and see if there's any possible way you two could work things out and get back together. I almost laughed out loud right there. Derek, it's done and finished. There's absolutely nothing left to work out between us. She made her choices, and I made mine in response. He looked visibly uncomfortable, like he knew he was about to say something I really wasn't going to like or appreciate hearing. Yeah, I totally get that and understand, but here's the thing, Emma's been talking a lot lately about how she thinks she made a huge mistake with everything. And well, she's been strongly hinting that maybe you guys could try again if you just gave it some time to heal. I set my coffee cup down on the table, trying my absolute best to keep my composure and stay calm. Derek, no offense intended, but Emma had her chance to make things right. She made a mistake, fine, I can accept that. But she didn't just make a simple mistake. She completely ghosted me for weeks on end. She cut me off like I didn't even exist in her life anymore. That's not something you can just bounce back from and pretend never happened. He nodded his head slowly, but I could clearly tell he wasn't really hearing or understanding what I was saying. Yeah, but what if she's genuinely serious about fixing things this time? She's been talking constantly about wanting to make it up to you and prove herself. I shook my head firmly. Derek, I genuinely appreciate you coming all the way out here and trying to help mediate this situation, but it's simply not going to happen between us. If Emma wants to move on with her life, that's perfectly fine with me. But I'm not even remotely interested in picking up where we left off or trying again. We sat there in this awkward, uncomfortable silence for a bit after that exchange, both of us kind of knowing deep down that this conversation wasn't going anywhere productive or meaningful. Eventually, Derek just shrugged and said, I understand completely, I just thought I'd give it a shot and try to help. I finished my coffee, stood up from the table, and said thanks for trying, man, but it's over between us. It's time for both of us to move on with our lives. He gave me this half-hearted apologetic smile, and we said our goodbyes. After that meeting, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would finally be the absolute last of it. I mean, how many different people could Emma possibly send after me to try and change my mind, right? Well, apparently I was wrong yet again, because the very next day I receive a message from Emma's aunt of all people. Now I barely even knew this woman at all. We'd met at maybe a couple of family events over the years, exchanged some polite small talk, but that was literally the extent of our relationship. So when I saw her name suddenly pop up on my phone screen, I knew something was seriously wrong with Emma's side of the family and their approach to all this. Her aunt starts off by saying how she'd heard about the breakup and wanted to reach out to see how I was holding up emotionally. At this point in the entire ordeal, I was so completely over all of it that I just straight up asked her directly, did Emma send you to contact me? Her response was, well, not exactly, but she's really been struggling terribly with all of this, and I thought perhaps I could help mediate things between you two and facilitate a conversation. I nearly threw my phone straight across the room in frustration. Mediation. I texted back immediately. There's absolutely nothing to mediate here. We're done, finished, over. I don't know how much clearer I can possibly make that statement. She didn't give up though, continuing to push. She said something about how love is always worth fighting for and how I shouldn't throw away years and years of a good, solid relationship over what she called a misunderstanding. That's when I finally realized the full picture. Emma had obviously been feeding her entire family this elaborate sob story, making it seem like I was the unreasonable one who'd overreacted to everything and blown things completely out of proportion. I didn't even bother replying to her aunt's message this time. I just blocked her number immediately and decided right then and there that was absolutely it. No more conversations, no more lengthy explanations, no more giving people the opportunity to drag me back into that incredibly toxic mess. I was done for real this time, completely and totally. After that final interaction, things finally quieted down significantly. No more random text messages, no more unexpected phone calls, no more random family members suddenly appearing in my inbox trying to guilt me into taking Emma back. It felt genuinely good, like I could finally breathe freely again without the constant weight of her drama hanging heavily over me. And honestly, for the first time in a genuinely long time, I felt like I was actually moving forward with my life instead of being stuck in this endless loop. No more waiting around for apologies that didn't actually mean anything substantial. No more wondering endlessly about what could have been if things were different. Just me, focusing entirely on what comes next in my future. And that's exactly what I needed more than anything else. Alright, so here's how everything finally wrapped up completely, and yeah, things definitely didn't end quietly or peacefully. Of course, you'd think after blocking Emma, her mother, her bridesmaids, and pretty much her entire extended family, things would just naturally die down and fade away. Well, that's not what happened at all, because Emma decided to make one final dramatic move. And it was the one that made me realize just how far she was willing to go to try and win me back, or at least get her way in this entire situation. So about a month after everything had gone down and seemingly settled, I received this letter in the actual physical mail. Yep, a literal handwritten letter, like we're living in the 1800s or something. I almost didn't even open it because seriously, who even sends actual letters anymore in this digital age? But the handwriting looked strangely familiar to me, and I figured why not, maybe it was some final attempt from Emma to reach out. But honestly, I wasn't expecting anything too crazy or dramatic. Boy, was I ever wrong about that assumption. I carefully opened the envelope and discovered it was this incredibly long handwritten message from Emma, like multiple pages worth of text. She absolutely poured her heart out on paper, saying she missed me desperately, she regretted everything that had happened, blah blah blah, all the usual stuff. But here's the part that really caught my attention. She didn't just say she was sorry for her actions. She started talking about how she wanted to meet up with me again in person, and then she casually mentioned how she still had the key to my apartment. Let me repeat that statement clearly. She said she still had the key to my apartment, the same key I had completely forgotten she even possessed in the first place. My stomach immediately dropped when I read that sentence. I mean, I'd already gone through the process of changing the locks once when this whole situation first started, but I hadn't even thought about the possibility that Emma might still think she somehow had access to my place. I immediately got up from my chair, double-checked all the locks on my doors again, and started thinking seriously about what my next steps should be to protect myself. But that's not even all of it. The letter wasn't just some simple heartfelt apology and explanation. She was basically laying out this elaborate detailed plan for how we could start completely fresh together. She mentioned that she'd been talking extensively with her mother Diana about how we should go to couples counseling together, and she genuinely thought if we could just meet up and talk face to face properly, we could work absolutely everything out between us. At this point, I was more annoyed and frustrated than anything else. Like, she seriously thought this was a good idea and approach after blocking me, ghosting me, sending her entire family after me like flying monkeys, and then acting like I was the one who needed to fix this entire situation she'd created. I genuinely couldn't believe the audacity. But it gets even better and more absurd. Toward the end of the letter, she mentioned that she'd already started making concrete arrangements for us to meet with a professional counselor. Like, she had already booked the appointments without even asking me if I was interested or willing to participate. The sheer audacity of it all, right? She didn't ask if I was remotely interested, didn't check in with me at all about my feelings, just assumed I'd automatically go along with her plan because she'd decided that's what should happen. I was absolutely fuming with anger. I couldn't believe that she still didn't get it or understand after everything that had transpired. She was still trying to control the entire situation, still trying to manipulate me into bending to her will and doing what she wanted. It was like she thought if she just planned everything out perfectly and presented it to me, I'd eventually give in and go along with it. So I sat down at my desk and wrote her a letter back. I figured if she wanted to play this old-fashioned game of sending physical letters back and forth, I'd go along with it one final time. But this time, I made things crystal clear in my response. I told her in absolutely no uncertain terms that we were done, finished, over. There would be no counseling sessions, no second chances, no meeting up to talk things through. I told her to return the key to my apartment even though I'd already changed the locks again for extra security, and that she desperately needed to move on with her life because I sure as hell was moving on with mine. I sent the letter back and felt pretty damn good about finally shutting that door permanently and for good. I thought that was definitely going to be the absolute end of everything. But nope, not quite yet. About a week later, I receive another letter from her in the mail. This time it was significantly much shorter than the previous one. She didn't argue with me or try to convince me to go to counseling anymore. She just said she understood where I was coming from with my perspective, but she still thought we should talk in person at least once. And then she said something that genuinely really freaked me out and made me uncomfortable. She mentioned that she'd driven by my apartment a couple of times recently and noticed that I wasn't home during those times. She didn't explain why she was driving by or what exactly she was doing there, but the fact that she was actively checking up on me like that sent genuine chills down my spine. At that point, I knew I absolutely had to do something more drastic to protect myself. I wasn't about to let this turn into some creepy stalking situation where she's constantly monitoring my movements. I immediately called my landlord and asked about getting extra security measures installed, maybe even security cameras around my apartment. I wasn't playing around anymore with this situation. And just when I thought things couldn't possibly get any weirder or more uncomfortable, I receive a phone call from my own mother. Now my mom knew about absolutely everything that had happened throughout this entire ordeal, and she'd been incredibly super supportive throughout all of it. But she called me to say that Emma had actually visited her at her house. Showed up completely unannounced at my mother's house, asking to talk about our relationship and situation. I almost dropped my phone in complete shock when she told me that Emma had gone to my mom's house to try and get her to convince me to take her back. I was beyond pissed at this point. Not only was Emma crossing every possible boundary with me personally, but now she was actively dragging my own family into this mess, trying to manipulate the situation through them as well. My mom, bless her heart, didn't fall for any of it. She told Emma very clearly that I'd already made my decision about everything and that she absolutely needed to respect it. Emma apparently got really emotional and started crying dramatically, but my mom didn't back down or change her position. She told her firmly that it was time to move on with her life and stop this behavior. After that phone call from my mother, I realized I needed to take one final drastic step to end this nightmare for good. I went ahead and filed for a restraining order against Emma. I didn't want to have to go that far, but I felt like I had absolutely no choice left. Emma was getting way too close to my personal space and my family, and I needed to legally protect myself and my loved ones. When Emma got officially served with the legal paperwork, she finally backed off completely. No more letters in the mail, no more surprise visits to family members, absolutely nothing. It was like she finally got the message loud and clear that I was serious. I didn't feel particularly good about having to go that far with legal action, but I knew deep down it was the right thing to do for my own safety and peace of mind. And honestly, after everything that happened throughout this entire ordeal, I learned a tremendous amount about myself as a person. I learned that it's completely okay to stand up firmly for your boundaries, even when people don't want to respect them or acknowledge them. I learned that you don't owe anyone endless chances, especially when they've broken your trust repeatedly. And most importantly, I learned that moving on isn't just about walking away from a bad situation. It's about actively protecting your peace and your future from people who would destroy both. So yeah, that's it, that's how it all ended finally. I'm finally free from all the drama and manipulation, and I'm moving forward with my life in a positive direction. It wasn't easy by any means, but I made it through to the other side. And now I'm just focused entirely on what's next for me. No more looking back at what could have been.